Hey, it's Maxi2. Welcome back to Reading Journal. This is for April 2021. I did read a bit more this month. No fancy drink, just water today. But start from the top of my little note card list here, which is issue number 1 of the 2018 run of West Coast Avengers. This version of the West Coast Avengers is, rather than set in LA, set in San Francisco, and it's a mostly younger group of heroes and Hawkeye. So you have Kate Bishop Hawkeye and also Clint Barton Hawkeye. I wasn't sure what I was going to think from the thing, but I actually kind of like it. I've not really read many stories with these younger characters. I've heard about Kate Bishop and America Chavez and Gwenpool, but I didn't know much about them. But they're kind of cool. It's got a bit more story than what the original West Coast Adventures number 1 had in it. This, has them actually, stop a thing from happening, and it intertwines that with the sort of, making a team, beginnings of making a team story as well. And so, overall, I think because it doesn't necessarily explain who anybody is as much as the older comics do, they have a bit more space for an actual story to happen in a single issue, which is cool. I have a bit of a worry that this might be leaning a bit too into the comedy type stuff that we have in Marvel that's especially prevalent in the MCU with certain films, and doesn't take itself particularly seriously. But this is a single issue, and it does have, some ups and downs of the emotional arc. And I had a good time with it. I'm not totally sure I want to search out the rest of the run. I was mostly just interested to see, being that I kind of grew up with West Coast Avengers, the original team, I just wanted to see what they did with it in this newer version. So moving down the list, the next thing I have on here is the Dr. Stone reboot Byakuya. And I don't know anything about Dr. Stone. I've not watched it, I've not read it, I don't know anything about it, besides it's a post-apocalypse where everyone was petrified into stone, and this is some whatever. This is a pretty fun, it's kind of depressing narratively, but I had a good time with it as a standalone, having no context of what any of anything is. As far as I know, it's not definitively canon to Dr. Stone. I think the author's note stuff in the back was yeah, this is just kind of a potential alternate universe side story type thing, but I had a good time with it. It's basically about this guy who is the main character of Dr. Stone's dad. He goes up in a spaceship onto the International Space Station just before everything goes crazy on Earth and everyone starts getting petrified, and he gets up there, and then shortly after, boom, everyone on Earth is petrified into stone, and there's just the people living on the International Space Station are potentially all that's left of humanity, and they try to figure out how to get back down and get to people and whatnot. And I think it's an interesting read, even if you don't have any context for this franchise, whatever. So the next thing I have is the My Hero Academia Team Up Missions #1. So I've watched a season and a half or something of My Hero Academia. I've seen season 1 and the first half of season 2. So like, I've got a little bit of a basis in the lore and everything. I'm not entirely sure, 1, if it's canon, or 2, when it's supposed to take place, but there's not really anything that seemed like spoilers in here. It's a situation where if you are a fan of Western comics, specifically Marvel had a run, maybe still does, called Team Up, where they basically take 2 characters and throw them in a book together and give them a reason to be fighting a villain and whatever. And that's kind of what this is. Each of the chapters is like the trainees or the students for UA? Yeah, UA High School are teamed up with some professional hero and then maybe some heroes from a different class or a different school or whatever, and they go out and they kind of fight crime together. And it's a fun little concept. One of my issues with this book is it definitely has at least one spot where it's got like the intro section, like this prequel intro thing, but then like all of that information is just told you again in the first chapter. I've also noticed other things. Maybe there's different artists on this. I couldn't tell. It didn't seem like it from looking at the credits, but there are some sections that look like they're just in a different art style than other sections, which maybe that's common. I don't know, but it just stood out to me. It was a little bit distracting, but like I liked it. It was fun to see some of the characters that I knew. Some of them I didn't know. Some of the other ones, I don't know. It's fun. And if you're into My Hero Academia or just kind of superhero comics, because My Hero Academia is really, really inspired by Western superhero comics, but it's got like that sort of anime twist to it where it's sort of like this really fun meshing of anime tropes with superhero tropes. And being that I'm someone who has always been a big fan of Western superhero comics, I've had a pretty good time with My Hero Academia, and you probably have a good time with this, even if you don't necessarily have that much of a background in the thing, just because this is sort of a spin-off, one-off type situation where you don't necessarily need to know anything except who the characters are. As far as I can tell, there's not like as far as I can tell, there's not like spoilers in here. So the next thing that I read was the Shaman King, volumes 1 through 3. This is a big book. Very, very big. I actually really, really liked it. I don't know if I will read the rest of it or if I will just check out there was a new anime adaptation in April that came out that adapts the finished version, because apparently the original anime adaptation wasn't particularly faithful to the source material. And so I'm interested in this because it gives you, it's a very good introduction to the world and to what's going on, but it doesn't totally get into what I think the main plot is going to be yet. Like, it starts to towards the end, but like the first couple chapters are a bit more slice of life-y, where we're just doing stuff. And then we get into, but this book is the first 3 volumes, so it took me a bit longer to read, but I was really engaged with it, and I am very, very interested in reading more, or at the very least, watching the anime. So the next thing to talk about is I finished the 4-issue miniseries of West Coast Avengers, issues 2 through 3. And one of the things that I realized after doing that is that the 4-issue miniseries is volume 1, and the issues that I already had were volume 2. So I still need to find issues 1 through 5 of West Coast Avengers, or whatever it is. And so what this is it's basically a miniseries that pretty much intends to show you that the West Coast Avengers are a good team. They're good enough to take on the villains. And while this villain that is the main villain of this series isn't a villain that I've heard of before, it seems that it was some villain that the main Avengers team had recently had issues defeating. And so it seems like this miniseries was basically to be like, the West Coast Avengers are strong enough to take down some even Avengers villains, like main Avengers villains. And I think it does a really good job of setting up the team and making them, feel like they're important. As I mentioned before, I believe I mentioned that this Iron Man in the team at this point in time is not Tony Stark. It is James Rhodes, who is also known as War Machine these days, Rhodey. And that's kind of plays in here and there, and it talks about it, but it's a good miniseries, but again, it still sort of falls into the thing of I think these days they could have fit these 4 issues into 2 issues, potentially, because they don't so much have their own individual story as much. Some of them do. There is a little time skip between, I think, 2 and 3. But I think they could have, in a modern book, made issues 1 through 4 into just 2 books instead. But even so, I had a good time with them. I generally have a good time with things that I read. I will move on to some stuff that I specifically went out of my way to find. I went to a comic book store. The first one is Peach Momoka's Demon Days X-Men. This is a pretty new, came out very recently. It's written and drawn by a single person, which I don't think is especially common for Western comics. It's more something you'll see in manga. And it's very pretty, these sort of watercolor looking, very Japanese art direction and cultural influence, where this author is basically taking Marvel characters and concepts and adapting them into a more Japanese-inspired situation. I don't know, it's really cool. The next thing will be this Demon Days Mariko, which I believe comes out next month. Yeah, June. Comes out next month, that I will hopefully be able to get my hands on. But we will see. I really, really like this art, and I really want to look into... I've looked into a little bit more what this artist does. They're part of Marvel's Stormbreakers program that they're doing right now, where they're sort of pulling... It's basically they're pulling in new artists to make things and giving them the creative freedom to make things. And I think this is going to be pretty much the hit of the current iteration of this program. The next one, it's this Marvel Ultraman book. Specifically, I don't know how well you can tell with the glare, but I specifically grabbed this variant art because I really like how it looks like it's very inspired by the original show. I don't know anything about Ultraman, so there was a lot of stuff that I was I don't know what this is. I don't know anything about Ultraman. So I learned things about Ultraman reading this. This is an interesting kind of opposite situation to the Peach Momoka thing, where this is sort of a westernized version of a Japanese thing where the writers and creative folk on this appear to be like American or something. I think that's interesting in its own way, but I also just wanted to see what Marvel was doing with this Ultraman book, because I have a vague interest in like kaiju stuff and tokusatsu stuff, and I was like, sure, let me look into this. Let me see what this is. And I mean, it's pretty cool. I'm still iffy on whether I want to pick up more of it, but it is definitely interesting enough that I might, whenever I end up in a comic store next, I might just pick one up myself. Alright, and so that's all of the little comic books, but I got one more book to talk about today, and that is the collected works of Filler Bunny. I've been a fan of Jonah Vasquez for a bit, just specifically from Invader Zim, watching Invader Zim growing up. That was an important show that I really liked. I picked up Filler Bunny and I didn't really know what Filler Bunny was, and Filler Bunny is a concept where it's a dumb, poorly drawn bunny comic that exists to fill space in books that either fill space in books that Jonan was writing that needed to reach a page limit for a deadline, or just to be a book to have at like a convention or something. And so they're very, very just off the wall, mostly made out of like gross out type stuff and like edgy like whatever. And then there is this middle third chapter that is apparently had a lot more time put into it. There's a whole like 2-page color section, and filler. It's an interesting read. And then there's a 4th chapter that was sort of added specifically for this collection that's in the more like modern, cleaner art style that Jonan has. I had a good time with it. But it's definitely not for everyone. I have a limit to gross out humor type stuff, and I definitely would say that this steps over it a little bit. It was cool to get to the back and see the guest comics and see that there's one back here by Edmund McMillan, who is probably best known as the Binding of Isaac, Super Meat Boy, the guy who made those. There's one here that's by Penn Ward, the creator of Adventure Time. It's cool to see sort of like who is sort of floating around in Jonan Vasquez's circle. So it's pretty cool. I wouldn't say it's required reading if you like a Jonan Vasquez, but I liked it enough to check it out, and maybe I should have looked into what it was before I bought it. I don't know. But that's all of the books I have this month. I read quite a bit more books, but I didn't read any, like, it's all still comics and stuff. I started reading some other, like, some chapter books and some other stuff like that, but I just didn't finish them. It's harder for me to read at work because there's a lot of stop and go. It's harder for me to read stuff that I don't have as good of a visual indicator of where I left off. So it just takes me longer to read other stuff that at work. So I didn't end up reading through. I have a couple books that I started that I will hopefully finish for next month, but who knows. Anyway, that's the end. If this sort of chilled out, talking about books thing is the thing that you are down with, hit the like button. If not, dislike the video. Do the thing. I don't care. Subscribe if you want to keep up with this and other shows on the channel. Leave a comment. Have you read any of these books? There's a lot of them here. What do you think about them? Let me know in the comments. Share the video so you can let your friends know about these books. I don't know. Do the things. And anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.